Hello, history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. History is full of unbelievable twists, turns, and tales that sound too wild to be true. Here are 25 of the most outrageous facts you won't believe actually happened. The U.S. government once poisoned alcohol during Prohibition, 1920 to 1933. The U.S. government tried to discourage people from drinking by ordering industrial alcohol suppliers to add poisonous chemicals to their products. This poisoned alcohol made its way into bootleg liquor, tragically causing illness and death for thousands. Known as the Chemists' War, this desperate and dangerous attempt to enforce prohibition is still debated as one of the government's most controversial tactics in history. France still collected taxes for the French Revolution until 2006. While the French Revolution ended over 200 years ago, some financial remnants lingered. The French government created a revolutionary tax to help pay off debts from the conflict, and it stuck around. Only in 2006 did they finally finish paying off the debt accumulated during the Revolutionary era. The fact that the tax continued for so long shows just how deep historical debts can run, even in a modern world. In medieval times, animals were put on trial. Believe it or not, animals were once put on trial and punished just like people. In medieval Europe, animals accused of crimes like harming humans or destroying crops were brought before a court. There are records of pigs, rats, and even insects being tried for crimes. Sometimes they were found guilty and sentenced, while others were pardoned. It sounds strange now, but it reflected how seriously people once viewed animal behavior. The anti-scalping law created high heels for men. High heels were originally worn by men, especially in 17th century Europe, to symbolize status. In the 1770s, some North American colonies passed anti-scalping laws during conflicts with Native Americans, which required men to wear heels as a way to identify themselves from afar. Men's heels were soon replaced by other identifying attire, and high heels shifted to women's fashion, where they remain today, but their origin story is far from what you'd expect. The London beer flood killed 8 people. In 1814, a giant vat of beer at the Moo Brewery in London burst, sending a tidal wave of beer through the streets. The force of the beer flood knocked down walls and filled basements, tragically drowning 8 people. Despite the tragedy, people reportedly rushed to scoop up the free beer. The flood caused huge damage, and the brewery even went to court over it. This unexpected beer tsunami has been remembered as one of London's most unusual disasters. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919. In Boston, a large storage tank holding over 2 million gallons of molasses burst open on a cold January day in 1919. A massive wave of sticky molasses, some 15 feet high, flooded the streets at 35 miles per hour, killing 21 people and injuring many more. The thick, sugary mess took months to clean up, and people claimed they could still smell molasses in the air for years. It's one of the weirdest disasters in American history. Russia sold Alaska for pennies per acre. In 1867, Russia sold Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million, or about 2 cents per acre. At the time, many Americans thought it was a waste of money, calling it Seward's Folly, after Secretary of State William Seward, who arranged the purchase. But the folly paid off big time when Alaska turned out to be rich in resources like gold and oil. Today, Alaska's natural wealth makes it one of the most valuable purchases in U.S. history. Ancient Romans had indoor plumbing. Over 2,000 years ago, the Romans built sophisticated plumbing systems that allowed water to flow into homes through pipes, giving many wealthy Romans running water. They also built elaborate public baths, sewer systems, and even flushing toilets. The impressive Roman aqueducts brought fresh water from miles away. It would take over 1,000 years for this level of plumbing to return after the Roman Empire fell, making their achievements even more impressive. The ice cream cone was an accident. In 1904, at the World's Fair in St. Louis, a Syrian concessionaire named Ernest Hamwi created the first ice cream cone by chance. When an ice cream vendor next to him ran out of dishes, Hamwi rolled up one of his crispy pastries, a waffle-like dessert, to hold the ice cream. It was a hit, and soon the ice cream cone became an essential treat. Hamwi's quick thinking gave us one of the most popular desserts still enjoyed around the world. Ancient Egyptians loved board games. The Egyptians weren't all about building pyramids, they also loved a good game. One of the oldest board games in the world, Senet, dates back to 3100 BCE in ancient Egypt. The game involved a wooden board with squares, and players used small pieces to race each other across the board. Some game boards were even found in King Tutankhamun's tomb, showing that games were a big part of Egyptian life, just like they are for us today. Women couldn't run in the first modern Olympics. When the first modern Olympics were held in 1896 in Athens, Greece, women were not allowed to compete. The organizers believed sports were too strenuous for women, so only men participated. A Greek woman named Stamata Revithi tried to run the marathon anyway, even though she wasn't officially allowed. She completed the route just after the men's race, making her the first known female Olympic marathon runner in spirit, if not an official record. The British sent convicts to colonize Australia. In the late 1700s, Britain faced overcrowded jails, so they came up with a surprising solution. They sent prisoners to colonize Australia. From 1788 to 1868, around 160,000 convicts were transported there to serve their sentences and help establish the colony. These convicts helped shape Australia's early society. What began as a penal colony grew into one of the most dynamic countries in the world, with a unique history because of its unusual beginnings. The first computer programmer. Ada Lovelace, an English mathematician in the 1800s, is considered the world's first computer programmer. She worked on Charles Babbage's early mechanical computer, the analytical engine, and wrote the first algorithm intended for it. Lovelace imagined how computers could go beyond math, predicting a future of computing. It's incredible that programming started with her visionary work, long before actual computers existed. George Washington, fake teeth. George Washington's famous false teeth were not made of wood, as some myths claim. Instead, he had multiple sets made from materials like ivory, lead, and even hippopotamus bone. These dentures were uncomfortable and required frequent maintenance, but he wore them throughout his presidency. His challenging dental history gives a surprising glimpse into the struggles of early dental care, even for a U.S. president. Beethoven was deaf. By the time Ludwig van Beethoven composed many of his masterpieces, he was nearly or completely deaf. He used a metal rod between his piano and his teeth to feel the vibrations and relied on his vivid imagination to hear the music in his mind. Despite his hearing loss, Beethoven created iconic works like his Ninth Symphony, showing incredible resilience and creativity. Genas Khans' armies communicated across vast distances. In the 13th century, Genas Khan's Mongol army used an impressive relay communication system called the Yam. Riders on horseback relayed messages across thousands of miles, switching horses at stations along the way, which kept communication fast and reliable. This system allowed the Mongols to coordinate large-scale invasions across Asia and Europe, contributing to their success. It was one of the most advanced communication networks of its time. Julius Caesar was kidnapped by pirates. As a young man, Julius Caesar was captured by pirates, who held him for ransom. Caesar found the ransom too low and demanded they increase it, promising that he'd come back to punish them. After his release, Caesar did just that. He returned with a fleet, captured the pirates, and had them executed. The incident shows Caesar's confidence and ambition, even in his youth. The Coliseum was once a forest. After the fall of Rome, the iconic Coliseum was left in ruins, and nature took over. By the 1600s, it was home to over 400 species of plants. Historians think that seeds from all over the Roman Empire, carried by gladiators and animals, took root there. The Colosseum essentially became an accidental botanical garden, with exotic plants from faraway lands until it was later restored. A year without a summer caused by a volcano. In 1816, a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia, Mount Tambora, spewed so much ash into the atmosphere that it affected global temperatures. Known as the year without a summer, temperatures dropped and crops failed worldwide, leading to food shortages and a gloomy year of cold, rainy weather. This strange summer even inspired Mary Shelley to write Frankenstein, as she spent time indoors during the chilly weather. The U.S. military's planned to build a moon base. During the Cold War, the U.S. military created Project Horizon, a top-secret plan to build a military base on the moon by 1966. The idea was to establish a strategic advantage over the Soviet Union in space. Engineers proposed sending troops and materials to the moon, but the project was ultimately scrapped due to cost and feasibility issues. If completed, it would have been one of history's wildest military projects. Mary Shelley created Frankenstein during a ghost story contest. The iconic horror novel Frankenstein was born out of a ghost story contest among friends. In 1816, Mary Shelley, her husband Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, and others were stuck indoors due to bad weather in Switzerland. To pass the time, they held a contest to write the scariest story. Mary's story about a scientist who creates a monster won and later became Frankenstein, the world's first science fiction novel. King Tut's parents were brother and sister. DNA testing of the famous boy King Tutankhamun's remains revealed that his parents were likely siblings. Marriages within the royal family were common in ancient Egypt, as they believed it preserved the royal bloodline. However, this practice also led to genetic issues. Tutankhamun himself had multiple health problems, and his early death at age the 19th of May have been partly due to his close family ties. President Jimmy Carter thought he saw a UFO. In 1969, before he became president, Jimmy Carter reported seeing a strange, glowing object in the sky. He described it as a bright light that changed colors and size. Though he later said he wasn't sure if it was an alien spacecraft, he never officially ruled out the possibility. Carter's sighting led him to promise more UFO transparency, making him one of the few world leaders to address UFOs openly. Vikings used urine to start fires. The resourceful Vikings used a type of fungus called touchwood, which they boiled in urine to make a slow-burning material they could carry to start fires. The sodium nitrate in urine helped the fungus smolder, allowing the Vikings to transport fire across distances. This early fire-starting method shows how the Vikings' ingenuity extended beyond battle tactics, using all available resources in unexpected ways. The US once planned to drop extra-large condoms as psychological warfare. During the Cold War, the CIA reportedly considered dropping large-sized condoms labeled medium over the Soviet Union. The bizarre plan was intended to suggest that American men were physically superior, aiming to demoralize Soviet troops. Although the plan never took place, it shows the lengths to which psychological warfare tactics were considered during the tense years of the Cold War. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed watching this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more videos.